Hi, and welcome to Part of My Disruption. I am Alan Berkson, and I'm the Director of Community Outreach for Freshdesk, and I'm joined, as always, by Dr. Disruptive, Jonathan Yarmis. How you doing, Doctor?
Excellent, thanks, Alan. You?
I'm doing well. I think we need to do a sound check, though. You want to push that play button?
Is that what I've got to do?
Yeah.
Ah, tricky.
We've been burnt in the past, so we apologize,
Yes.
but we just want to make sure that there is actually sound coming out. We've recorded ones for the hearing impaired.
Yes, if you're a lip reader, you were able to understand the show.
I know there's a delay.
So if my browser doesn't currently recognize any of the video formats available.
We are being disrupted.
Yes. Well, the other thing we can do, if anybody's watching,
If you can just tweet out and make sure that you can see it on sound or
the hashtag PM Disrupt.
PM Disrupt. So we're going to take a moment to figure out if we're actually on the air. Oh boy.
That's pretty good that my Chrome browser doesn't support the video formats.
We got to talk to.
That it has in the past.
Right.
But other than that, we've got all this technology now.
Let's see if now we're going to go Chrome versus iPhone.
Oh.
And see if my iPhone is going to show me that we're on air. And I think it is, Jonathan. So we're going to take a moment. There we go.
Yes.
Hey, we're live. All right. And there was much rejoicing. Should we start again?
We should.
Again, I'm Alan Berkson. I'm the Director of Community Outreach for Freshdesk. And this is Jonathan Yarmis, aka Dr. Disruptive. And this is welcome to Part of My Disruption. We are here the second Friday of every month. Our next show will be October 9th.
Here being the Stanford Innovation
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
Center.
We are
off your game today.
It's the technical difficulty. Yeah. We are broadcasting live from the Stanford Innovation Center in beautiful
downtown Stanford,
Connecticut. It's
it's
overcast today.
Yeah, but it's below 90 degrees, so that's a good thing.
It's below 90 degrees and it's not raining.
The Mets have a 6.5 game lead.
The Mets. That makes me feel better for having the Patriots win last night.
Oh, I watched the Met game.
Yep. Oh, that was fun. Cologne is an ageless wonder.
Kind of like me.
He's like 60, right?
I am. He's not. He's 18 years younger than me. And you're going to call him an ageless wonder?
So it is September 11th.
Yeah.
We're not here to talk about necessarily September 11th, but we're kind of entertainment, so we want to keep it a little bit lighter. But there's a lot has changed since 2001, so maybe that's a good way for us to kind of kick off.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Let's contrast it to what would happen if that terrible event happened today. The odds are we'd find out about it via Twitter or Facebook, and the spread of it would be instant, thousands of pictures, that kind of thing.
Well, just to put it in perspective, so 2001, there is no Twitter, there is no Facebook, there's barely smartphones. There's Blackberries.
Yeah, I found
BlackBerry is the epitome of smartphone.
Yeah. I found out about 9/11. It's kind of an interesting, old-fashioned story. I was working from home that day. I went down to my office, turned on the radio, listening to Howard Stern, no satellite radio, listening to him on terrestrial radio. And he was talking about this, event, and I'm thinking, it doesn't sound like he's kidding. So I then turned on cable TV. I didn't go to the internet. I turned on cable TV. Back then, I was leading edge. I had, in my office at home, I had something from Gateway, a gateway destination system. I don't know if you remember those. This thing had a 35-inch tube monitor. And the monitor back then was so huge, I actually built a house and had a purpose-built the installation.
35 inches. That thing must have weighed like 200 pounds.
Oh, it was, it was massive, purpose-built installation. The resolution was miserable. I mean, it was useful for displaying graphics. It was terrible for Microsoft Word or Excel, which did exist back then. But I turned on CNN, and not 2 minutes later, the second plane hit. But it was cable TV on an old-fashioned computer, after listening on the radio, and CNN was it. Yeah, very, very different technological world. And email, while reasonably ubiquitous back then, my email stream with people talking about it was relatively limited.
Right.
The information flows you had were largely constrained to broadcast TV. The internet back then was not a primary, most of the breaking stuff I saw came over TV,
right,
and only later made its way onto the websites of the major broadcast partners. There were no BuzzFeeds, no.
Well, and I think for me, one of the interesting things was nobody knew what was going on. Today, you'd have people live streaming from all over the place.
Right.
There'd be a much more information and much
more disinformation. I mean, that's
wow.
Well, I think that's a relevant discussion point. That there are a whole bunch of things. Yes, we've got much more information, but one of the challenges we have in this instant, always-on world is what's relevant and what's not. If I get the name wrong, I apologize. I believe it's Andy Card. But when there was the Arab Spring, he was a journalist at NPR, and he had a carefully cultivated group of sources on the ground in Cairo, people he had met in person. So when you had all of this stuff going on, what's going on in Twitter, he was able to cull through and say, yeah, this is good information. This is just merely echo chamber effect. This is misinformation. And I think the volumes, and that I think brings up another interesting discussion that I think is interestingly related to 9/11 and under the broad umbrella of big data.
Right.
And big data, gives us all sorts of wonderful pieces of information, but it's also a problem. And I know it's politically incorrect, but for a long while now, I've used 9/11 as the classic instance of the problem of big data. And by that I mean, on 9/12, we had retraced the steps of all of the terrorists for months, if not years beforehand. We had all of that information in hand, so it was all there, but we didn't piece it together until after the fact. And the problem with big data oftentimes is, the truth isn't immediately evident from the data unless you ask the right questions. And so if somebody weeks or months before had said, for instance, give me a list of all of those people who have gotten the flight skills, who have learned to take off but not to land, seriously, 4 names would have popped up, and we would have said, we would have found the linkages between them. We would have found all sorts of things. The information was there to be discovered, and therein lies the ongoing challenge. And it's not just, a national security issue. It's a marketer's challenge issue. We're drowning in data. And one of my common observations, and I think, big data is a fascinating trend and important, and fabulous things can be done with it. But at the end of the day,
I like big data, and I cannot lie.
But rarely is the answer to any problem I've come across, I need more data. We've got massive amounts of data, and rarely is more data the solution to the problem. And it's more a matter of how do we build business value, security value, whatever it is, about all the assembled data that we've already got. And I think that's one of the part of my day job as an analyst. I identify these macro trends that are going on in the market. And so back in 2007, I started talking about social mobile cloud and big data as the next 4. that were going to take over the world. Here we are 8 years later, and the things I've been talking about, the next wave is about, there's this hierarchy from data to information to knowledge to wisdom with increasing levels of value. I've laughed about it in this forum before. In 1971, maybe, had a summer job at 1133 Westchester Avenue, around the corner here. It was the headquarters of IBM's data processing division. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Just for perspective.
Yeah, I was in high school. I was still, but amazingly enough, working on computers, even in high school back then. We've had this discussion before.
Yes.
But it was IBM's data processing division headquarters. And that's what we did back in the 70s. We did data processing. And we've kept trying to move up the value chain, the increasing levels of value until we got to 2008, 2009, 2010. And all of a sudden we kind of blew ourselves back to the beginning and said, the answer is data. It's like, no, it's how do we get the insight out of the data that we've already got? I mean, the Internet of Things is going to blow that one to pieces. We're going to have billions of sensors.
Billions.
Yeah, if not trillions of sensors. And if we can't get the feedback on the information we've already got, what are we going to do with more of that stuff?
In the 80s and 90s, we were working on databases, and then there was this evolution to the data warehouse, and there was business intelligence, which is like the oxymoron of the century, right? What's next?
I think what's next at some level, there are a whole bunch of things where, using my old employer, Gartner, the hype cycle, there are certain technologies that we dramatically overhype in the beginning, and there are tons of them, like data warehouses and business intelligence and artificial intelligence and things like that. And we so overhype them. And then what happens when they fail to meet the expectations of those lofty beginning days? We tend to say, oh, they failed and they're never going to work, and we forget about them.
Right.
Meantime, the committed stay home and keep working on it because they know there's a there, even if it's years, if not decades later before this stuff manifests itself. And I think some of those things, like analytics, we spend so much time with databases worrying about putting the information in a machine manageable form. We never particularly focused on, and how do we get it out and turn it into value and summarize it, and oh, by the way, do it in near real time, because that's the requirements of the world right now.
We have dashboards, Jonathan.
Yes.
We have business dashboards.
Yes.
That's how we work, right?
Yes, and that's just what we need, another cue for users to manage. I mean, the whole notion of the attention span of users is one we're fighting all the time. And that's why I come back to whether you want to call it AI or whatever. Dashboards are great, but what am I going to do? I sit there and stare at it. Everything's working. Okay.
Right. Well, that's where we talk about this on the customer service side, where you got to get beyond waiting for someone to ask a question and being there to give them the information when they need it.
Yes.
So it's prescriptive, it's proactive, it's predictive.
Yes. Anticipatory. It's self-correcting. There are a whole bunch of other things. That's one of my favorite stories. And I'm encroaching on your turf in the customer support area. I don't know if it's still the case, but for a long time, the travel site Kayak did not have a customer support department. They instead put everybody on the phones, including developers. And their hope was, after the third time a customer called in and said, how do I do this? And the developer goes, you pull down at some point the developer goes, there's a problem with that pull down.
Right.
Why don't I just fix it? And then those people won't call up and bother me.
Right.
That's
part of the whole silos of data.
Yes.
Where there's information that customer service has, or accounting has, or marketing has, or HR has, that has value, but it's siloed, it's compartmentalized.
Yeah, and oh, by the way, the bad news is when it's not siloed and compartmentalized, it's conflicting and duplicative. So we've got multiple problems on that front, which we have yet to serve. The age-old holy grail of one version of the truth.
Right. Well, another thing that from 9/11 was the idea. I had customers. I was in the managed service business at the time, and I had customers who they lost their office and they went down. They came into my office, sat down with their computers plugged into our network, and had to get to work.
Yeah, that's another way the world has changed dramatically in that time. That disaster recovery back then was, the things we kind of planned for were different and weren't. Some of it relates to we're in a much more real-time world. I mean, I laugh about how the internet's evolved back to the hype cycle.
Right.
If in 2001 or so, I had said to you that if an internet connection goes down, we may as well go home because we can't get any work done. You would have said, yeah.
In fact, I remember,
I can't get to my pets.com.
I remember having this conversation with clients, which is, if your internet connection goes down, how much work can you do, and what can you, to make sure that they had data on site.
Right.
That was part of the conversation. Well, let's put it in two places. Let's have it on site so you continue to work, and then we'll replicate it off site so you have but that conversation is totally different.
Oh, now, yeah, the whole notion of where data resides is a fascinating conversation. Back then, it usually resided in a single large location, raised floors, water cooled, hardened and that kind of stuff. And now,
well, that's still happening, but it's commoditized. Yeah. Someone else is doing it for you.
Yes, with and without your knowledge.
Right. Well, yeah. But it's your expectation.
Yes, but the notion of where data resides. I mean, Facebook just had kind of a brinksmanship discussion with the Russian government over that. The Russian government said, data on our users needs to be in our country. And Facebook said, we can't guarantee that. I mean, that to me is interesting about another change since 2001. The notion that a social media company could go to the Russian government and go, sorry, we can't do that. And the Russian government goes, oh, okay. And even back then, scale and Facebook just recently had one of those milestone days. It kind of, it's not our stat of the day.
That's an insane milestone.
1 billion simultaneous users. 1 billion, I mean, what's the world's population?
7 billion.
Yeah, so 15% of the world was on Facebook simultaneously. It's
not signed up for, as a
active that day. Yeah,
right.
And that day, their active users that day was about 1.7 billion. So over 20% of the world's population logged into Facebook that day.
That's insane.
Yeah, and you think about what that to me puts in the context so much of what's changed in the 14 years. We are now hyper connected in ways that even and I was an internet zealot back in the time. I started working in this space, in the internet space in 95 or so.
Right.
If you told me some of this stuff, I would have said, yeah, maybe with my it's been just so amazing. But where we've changed, the reliance on this infrastructure, but also the terrible fragility of it. Just this week, I think it was this week, the government announced that they need to devote more resources to basically cyber warfare.
Well, that's the new front.
Yeah. An old Gartner colleague, Richard Stennon, wrote a book talking about the next war is going to be cyber warfare, and the only challenge I made to him on his Facebook post about it is, what do you mean the next one? You know,
Right.
it's already.
That's like the joke of there are 90% of companies admit they have been hacked, and the other 10% don't
know,
admit it.
yeah, or don't know.
Or don't know or don't admit it.
Yeah.
Mhm. All right, so let's come back to the 21st century. The Oracle has come down from the mountain to give us gifts.
Cupertino.
And
can I yawn? I
wait,
mean,
no, look, from the best I can understand it, Apple has invented the pencil and 3D.
Yes, and they redefined the tablet to look like a Surface. I still marvel at their ability to take what are pretty mundane announcements, generate this massive amount of attention for things that either have, Frank Shaw, who's a senior communications guy at Microsoft, was just kind of laughing at the tablet announcement, because it's like this big fat thing that looks like a laptop and a keyboard, and it's like Apple, after years of saying there's really significant distinction between the tablet, which is more or less a consumption device, and a laptop, which is a content creation device, they decided, nah, we can blur the distinctions. And I was going to say 3 years from now, people will think that, no, there are a lot of people today who think they invented the form factor. So the big iPad announcement, on the one hand, it's like, okay, let's give Microsoft credit where credit's due. And Microsoft has had its share of clunkers on the hardware side, from early convertible tablets. I carried one around in 2001, 2002. Not very good. The hardware was adequate, the software was gruesome, and they've gotten pretty darn good. And if imitation is the sincerest form of flattery,
Right.
Microsoft ought to be flattered about this one, that Apple acknowledged the platform was appropriate, and that there was a market for that. And that's one of the things that I think is, in my mind, the challenge of Apple. If you look at the things they've kind of broken through with all of these announcements, they're largely things, with the exception of the touch, and we'll come back to that in a moment, they're things that others have done.
Right.
It's like,
right.
You want a stylus?
Wait.
I've got a stylus.
But what did Steve Jobs say in 2010 about I think it was the Palm Pilot he was talking about.
Yeah, he was not a big fan of stylized.
He said if it has a stylus,
stylus-y, we failed.
And if it has a stylus, we failed. 2010. So I don't know. You think is he like turning over a little bit?
No, because
it's not a stylus. It's a come on. This is a fine-tuned.
Well, there are reasons why it's useful. And as one who has lived with this as my input device for a long time, there are times when the precision of something like that and the sensitivity and so on is in fact useful.
So this is a stylus. Okay, it's got that little rubber thing and it'll work, but it's pretty much useless. I never use it, and people give these out at trade shows. There's no value to them.
Yeah.
And that's probably, it's precision, I think, is what makes the whole difference.
Yes, and we're certainly, this is, I can even use a pun, a precursor to gesture-based interfaces. And I think that's part of what Apple's getting to, because I think commensurate with this, the 3D or the pressure-sensitive interface, I think that is a significant step forward in my mind. That's perhaps the best thing that Apple announced here, because I think, we all inherently understand that I might want something to behave differently if I press it softly versus press it firmly. And I've got questions as to how accurate and reliable and durable that's going to be. That's
something I wondered about. Is that tip going to have to be replaced? Is that?
Yeah, or when you start doing it with touch, is it, is the screen going to compromise, viewability because it's now thicker, or there are going to be pixel dropouts kind of thing on the input. So I've got questions as to the reliability, but hey, it's V1, and and Apple will get away with it for the most part. But I think the touch thing is interesting.
But it's amazing because everyone wants to be able to do what Apple does in terms of and it's no one can duplicate it.
No.
And and even without Jobs, they're still.
The fact that Tim Cook, I mean, he's a wonderful executive, but he's not the first guy you'd invite to a cocktail party. He's.
That's a quote. You should tweet that out. PM disrupt. Hashtag PM disrupt.
Yeah. But yes, they continue to do it. That Apple, mind distortion field is an amazing thing. But some of it, and I grudgingly give Apple credit because there are a lot of things, they do fabulously well, just not as good as everybody would have you believe. But what they do fabulously well is understand and anticipate what people really want and how to make systems easy to use.
That's the second piece I think is probably the most critical. There's a trend we're seeing in enterprise software, the consumerization of IT, where there's expectation in the enterprise software is traditionally clunky. I mean, I can picture CICS green screens, I'm sure a lot of people can. And so now there's the expectation that you have the same type of interface as you'd have in consumer, like you'd have on Amazon or something like that. And we expect the same thing out of our hardware. And that's something Apple recognized a long time ago, that it's not just about innovation, it's about how much effort does it take to do what you need to do.
And I think you also brought up a really interesting point about how this has taken over the enterprise, because fairly quietly, Apple has made some huge moves in the enterprise in the last few months. They announced this joint development and selling partnership with IBM a few months ago, so that if you're wondering how Apple is going to get in the front door of the enterprise, it's not by hiring 5,000 blue-suited salespeople. It's by equipping the IBM salespeople to carry it in. And they just announced in the last week or so an announcement with Cisco.
Which is sort of feeling a little bit like BlackBerry Enterprise Server.
In a good way.
No, but in a good way. No, because
yes.
I wrote, back in 2010, I wrote about, that iPhone was new, BlackBerry was the gold standard for corporate communication. You had control, you had all the stuff that you can have accountability, you have audit, everything you wanted in it. And then suddenly the CEO says, no, I want to get my email on this.
Right.
And the IT director goes, but I can't manage that. I can't track that. I can't, if you lose it, I can't wipe it. All the stuff that makes them nervous. And Apple's kind of starting to bring those pieces together.
And oh, by the way, so is BlackBerry. They acquired Good.
Right.
Yeah. So BlackBerry, in its attempt to remain relevant largely as a software provider and platform, made an acquisition of Good Technologies, who has all sorts of client stuff that gives.
Good is used by significantly in financial services and healthcare.
Yeah. Well, they're a credible enterprise player. So, BlackBerry, we may remember it as the keyboard guys, but John Chen, the CEO, is building his resume as a significant turnaround guy, where he's radically transformed businesses. Did it with Sybase. Yeah. Now with BlackBerry, but the Apple partnerships with Cisco and IBM, and real significant partnerships are noteworthy. And I think that Apple in the enterprise, they're obviously have done traditionally and continue to do well in the academic environment. Your kids are getting Macs, right? Hey, girls.
They are.
Yeah. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
But the Apple presence in the enterprise, I think, is something that's lost. Now, the other thing I think that's interesting and underappreciated about this announcement is Apple and its fracturing relationship with the carriers.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
you
the carriers have already started the change in the model. I guess it's a chicken egg thing, which is which.
Yeah. Well, I think the answer, what the carriers were doing is, I think necessary and independent of what Apple was doing. And so let's talk about what the carriers are doing. They used to sell you a subsidized phone, and you waited around 2 years, and and then you could upgrade your phone again. They're basically saying, we're not going to subsidize the phones anymore. You're going to pay full freight for the phone on installment plan basis. So, $25 a month, after a certain point, the phone is yours and you can do with it as you see fit. You can change at any point. If you haven't acquired the phone, you'll just continue making installment payments on the new phone. So what Apple announced was its version of that. So that you can lease effectively in many ways from Apple their phone, pay them $30 a month, and anytime a new iPhone comes out, you can get the new iPhone. There are a couple of, and I haven't studied the details enough, so let me be careful here, but there are a couple of gotchas. Gotcha number one, they're charging you more, it seems, than the carriers are, and Apple's value proposition for that is, but we're unlocked, you can switch carriers anytime you want.
There's one more piece to that. They're throwing in Apple Care. Apple Care is included in the lease price.
Is it? Okay.
So, and you get it, and it's less, whereas I don't know if anybody's ever tried to get insurance from a carrier. But you pay your $10 a month, and then when you want to replace your phone, it costs anywhere from $150 to $200.
And only do it once or twice, because the third time it happens, you're deemed chronically.
So this is actually could be the competitive differentiation, is that Apple Care is thrown in with their lease, and it's $75 to replace your phone.
Now, the downside is, as I understand it, in this particular instance, the phone's never yours. Where, so I'm a non-Apple person, but I'm looking at perhaps changing my phone to the Samsung S6
Oh,
Edge.
Samsung.
Yeah. No. I'll warn you before I go over to the dark side.
There would be like a tectonic shift.
Yeah, but I was looking, and part of it capitalizing on new Apple phones. Gazelle has announced they'll give you a 10% kicker. So I was looking, what can I get for this phone?
Right.
I can get $275 for that phone. So if you start at some level doing
you're saying
math,
so because your Apple phone you don't own, when you're finished with you get
you keep paying the $30. It's never yours. So if you
Additionally,
sit there and do the math, somebody I'm sure has got some spreadsheets with the crossover point, how long you're going to hold the phone.
It's like buying a car. I mean,
it's very much, and the price points are approaching that. Yeah. When you figure the value, the cost of the service from the carrier, it is like buying a car.
Right, but we're still in a massive improvement cycle for phones. One thing I was thinking about, I'm looking to buy computers for my kids. The one factor that does not, going back to 2001 versus now, in 2001, the first thing I think about is what? Anybody? CPU speed, right? You want to get the fastest CPU, and then the second thing you think about is maybe how much memory and then how much hard drive space, right? CPU is not a factor.
None of that's a factor. So
RAM
is a factor.
Memory is still a factor, but a small one. But now it's all about usability. It's all about form factor. It's all about experience.
Yes,
But what I'm saying is we're still in the arms race in terms of functionality. So that
was that a pun? ARM processors?
No. No. In terms of functionality, because this phone, I have a computer at home that's 5 years old.
All that you needed to do is run a browser. And it runs a browser.
And I recently added more memory to it. That was about it. And it runs great. And I expect
that with Windows 10, it probably runs even a little better.
I haven't upgraded yet. I'll let you know. But we're still in an arms race where somebody looks at their phone and says, after a year, after 2 years, say, "Oh, my phone's old, I need a new one."
Well, I think that's very much less the case now. I think we're still there, and you're right, but I see the
So
end.
wait, I don't need a 35 megapixel camera?
Yeah.
Or 100, some crazy numbers are coming out.
Yes, and
That means if I wanted to blow up a picture to the size of this room.
right.
Like this.
Yes, yeah. Again, if we tilted the camera, as a reminder, we're actually in the old, the Stanford Innovation Center is the old town hall, and we are in the courtroom of the old town hall, and Alan and I are seated at the judge's bench. I still haven't gotten the gavel, and we declare our audience guilty. Yeah, you're sentenced to stay here another half hour.
All right, I want to get to a couple of rapid fire ones here, Jonathan.
Wait, Apple TV.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, Apple TV. The funny thing is that I've never been. I've used TiVo. I have a Roku.
I have a Roku.
I have a Samsung Smart TV.
I do too.
But I've never. I don't know. Apple. The whole home entertainment system hasn't really driven me to want to make any purchasing decisions.
No, the experience that you're talking about is still a long way from good. Nothing Apple's done here solved that problem.
So why do you want to talk about it?
what I think just for that reason. Okay. But also, the interesting thing is by opening up the platform to developers, I think that's an interesting move.
This is a whole culture. As much as I'm a computer guy, I've never been a gaming person.
I don't think gaming, by the way, is going to be the only application category that exploits it. So that's a natural and an early one.
But that's a living room fixture.
Gaming. Yes.
Gaming.
Yes.
So if you're gonna get rid of the Xbox, if you're gonna get rid of it, you have to be able to cover some of that functionality.
Yes, but the challenge you'll have as a gaming platform, in some ways, the most powerful devices anybody's got in their living room are those gaming consoles. Those things are kick-ass. And
can you say that on our show?
I did.
You did. Let's see if it gets bleeped out.
Yeah, the internet censors.
Right.
Apple is monitoring our content, and that since they have close control of the ecosystem. But I think the answer is this is not going after the dedicated gamer marketplace, because they're going to want a console, and the power in the Apple TV is inadequate for that. But the casual gaming market is the rapidly growing segment, and they very much can address that. But I also think by opening up the platform to applications, similarly as with the iPhone, the iPhone as an Apple captive platform, was interesting, breakthrough interface, but not terribly compelling. It wasn't until they opened up to apps and unleashed the creativity of application developers that we said, wow, smartphones really are cool.
Well, that's got to be how. That's how Apple won the market.
That's how everybody always wins the market. Yeah. The platforms themselves, user interfaces are really boring. We spend a lot of time talking about operating systems. Operating systems don't do anything useful for you for the most part. It's the applications and the content. And if Apple TV is able to generate some interesting and innovative applications, and we go, holy cow, it's not just do you have a licensing agreement with Netflix, but it's what are we doing to intelligently parse the system so it automatically records the content I want and presents me meaningful things and does interesting mashups and stuff like that, and things that we can't begin to contemplate until we see what innovative application developers do. So that's one where I look at it and as yet another TV platform, go buy a Chrome stick, go buy all of these things do more or less the same thing, but opening it up to applications, it could be interesting.
That's the kicker. Okay. All right, so let's do a couple of rapid fire ones here. Yahoo and Marissa Mayer, is the honeymoon over?
I'd say we're getting close to divorce, and the issue is, for a long while now, Yahoo has, its whole enterprise value effectively was accounted for by its stake in the Chinese commerce company Alibaba. That the rest of the company was valued at zero from a stock market perspective. And Yahoo's had continuing challenges trying to grow that whole business, and shareholders were patient because there was this huge Alibaba stake that they held that actually had massive amounts of value. Well, the shockwave this week was an IRS, not a ruling per se, but Yahoo for the longest time hoped it would be able to structure the spin-off of the Alibaba stake in a tax-free fashion. And this is something, is it $30, $40 billion, something in that range. So as you might imagine, the potential tax bill, if they have to pay taxes on the transaction, is significant. And the IRS, in effect, said, we're not yet prepared to declare that you can do it tax-free. In fact, we've got significant reservations about that. And it's like, whoa, if all of a sudden you lop off 30% of the value of that, the whole strategy, the whole ability to turn the company around, I think the honeymoon is over, and this is one of those things, I will acknowledge upfront that there's probably a large amount of sexism. She's pregnant with twins. It wouldn't surprise me if she goes on maternity leave and doesn't come back. That's one of those things where it will present a graceful exit, because if not, she'll just be unceremoniously ousted. But I think the handwriting's on the wall there.
All right.
That Yahoo hasn't made sufficient progress on its own.
So we were talking about big data, and IBM is really trying hard to figure out how to make sense of big data.
Yes.
What they're doing with Watson is innovative, remarkable, exciting, and they've made an interesting acquisition.
Yeah, they acquired this medical company called Merge, and Merge owns about 30 billion images. CAT scans, MRIs. I'm not really a doctor, but I play one on part of my disruption, so I can't tell exactly what medical images they've got, but they've got 30 billion of them.
Right.
And in effect, what they're doing is feeding them into Watson, and through that, hoping Watson is better able to identify patterns and therefore diagnoses. So that now what happens when your doctor looks at your scan, they pretty much look at your scan and go, ooh, that's a funny looking spot. I think I've seen that before.
Right, they're making the same pattern recognition. That's what they've been trained. They've seen hundreds, maybe thousands of them.
Yes, but their universe is really limited.
It's minuscule compared to the pool of images that are available.
Yeah, so in effect, what they've done is acquired this and hopefully through it get better diagnoses of cancer and heart disease, so that you can get more accurate diagnoses, more efficient and more timely. So it's a fascinating thing. Watson is a largely misunderstood technology. I think people still largely associate it with its ability to play Jeopardy, and even with that, don't understand actually how it was able to play Jeopardy so well. And that's a longer discussion than we've got time for here. But the bottom line, it's got a huge ability to ingest information and draw connections from it. And like a lot of things, it brings very much to mind the garbage in, garbage out phenomenon. One of the interesting things I found about Watson, in one of the behind the scenes things when it was playing Jeopardy, they had it ingest all sorts of information sources. And one of them was the Urban Dictionary. And what they discovered was, in fact, the Urban Dictionary was leading Watson to draw many incorrect conclusions. So they removed it from its information base, and it actually played Jeopardy better after removing the Urban Dictionary.
garbage in, garbage out. Right?
Yes, very much so.
All right. We don't talk a lot about the live streaming. There's been a lot of hype, a lot of movement, let's say, in the market for live streaming. Facebook recently got into it as well, but there is a trend here.
Yes, there's a trend towards more. No,
well, why is it important? Why does Facebook think that it's important?
Well, the answer why Facebook thinks it's important and why we might think it's important are two different things. Facebook thinks it's important because it's another advertising monetization opportunity and vehicle. And oh, by the way, something they can appeal. Facebook's taken a slightly different approach than Periscope, now Twitter, has taken, where any of us can do it. Facebook started off with celebrities, has now, just in the last week or two, expanded it to include journalists, but haven't done it for the rest of us. And this is one of those things where we're doing this on video, and so obviously at some level we believe that video is an important content type.
Right.
But the democratization of video is, we really ought to get some 15-year-old on here, to explain why they use Snapchat instead of texting, and why video is the most important thing. Because a picture may be worth 1,000 words, but 1,000 pictures takes a lot of, even at 30.
My kids who are teenagers consume way more content in video form than written form.
Yeah, and I just find video for a lot of things hugely inefficient. If I have to watch a news story for a minute and a half on TV versus a quick scan on the screen, video at some level is an inefficient communications mechanism.
But I think I think it's not about news; it's about access. The video, the live video that I'm attracted to, is showing me something that I just don't see anywhere else. It's either someone is real time at an event that nothing else will, live is always going to be better, or someone is giving me access.
Give me an example of that, because a lot of those things.
Scoble has an early access to Facebook video, and he's been running around doing his videos at whatever labs, and he's doing his interviews, and I find them compelling.
But I'd rather somebody take the hours video he did, compile it down into I can't believe I'm saying this, BuzzFeed top 10.
No, but I like to hear. I like to hear the founder or the person who he's interviewing.
Some of those, yes, yeah. I agree.
No, but there's a lot of garbage there, sure.
Yeah, and,
but I think that's
the real time, but the real time element of it, I think, is horribly wrong. I don't want to watch that in real time.
Well, that I don't. But if something's happening, there's an event happening, I like to, and somebody's there, oh, here, show me it.
Yeah, but it brings to mind I'm sorry this is so long, but I didn't have the time to make it shorter. I'm sorry I made you watch this whole stupid stream because I didn't have time to summarize the highlights. This is something I just admit to not understanding, think it's low value, and, at my own peril, I think this is going to be a passing fad that we're going to need some form of curation and summarization, and this notion of everybody broadcasting everything is not what anybody needs.
No one ever went broke catering to the narcissistic tendencies of people, and if there's anything that's narcissistic, it's live streaming.
Well, I think there are some people who are going to go broke at that. In the stock market, they talk about these unicorns, private companies that have more than $1 billion valuations, and there are a lot of them out there. And I think it's Bill Gurley, the venture capitalist, said pretty soon there are going to be some dead unicorns. And I think some of these people who are betting on narcissistic, ubiquitous video are going to be dead unicorns.
All right, it's time for our monthly features. We've got quite a few: pet peeves, shame on you, kudos, factoids, quote of the month.
All right.
I like your pet peeve. I actually laughed out loud when I read it.
Yeah. This is one that maybe, I won't say unique to us sitting here in Fairfield County, but it is a pervasive problem for those of us sitting here in Fairfield County. It's websites that calculate the nearest store to you based on distance. I am not near Hicksville, Long Island. It may be 12 miles as the crow flies, but to get to Hicksville, I have to drive down through the Bronx, over the Throgs Neck Bridge, out the northern state of Long Island Expressway. Yeah, that the calculations they base do not take into account the fact that there's a significant body of water between us.
They need to put the GPS routing into their distance calculations.
Yes, and that just happens time and again in shopping things.
I have to say, I never really thought about that until I saw it on this pet peeve, and it's like, where's the nearest Lowe's?
Well,
where's the nearest whatever? And
but, in all candor, the reason why it surfaces for me is, being single, dating sites. Yeah. Women near me are all on Long Island. Yeah.
12 miles away.
Yeah. It's like, no, that's 2 hours on a toll. Yeah.
Well, you just need a large enough drum.
Or a boat. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe there's somewhere a little icon that I haven't chosen the right form of transportation.
Isn't Musk working on a personal drone travel, electric things? No, never mind. All right. This is sort of like a repeat offender on the shame on use.
Yeah. This is a different variation on it. Where we always hated the ones before that. Software, when you're doing an install of something, tries to pull along something else. Like when you're installing Java, it tries to get you by default to install
McAfee, I think.
Yeah, McAfee security.
Or maybe that's Adobe. I think it's Adobe Flash trying to get you to install McAfee.
Yeah, but anyhow, one of the things I use way too often because I'm a geek. There's an application and website speed test, so you can see I'm a geek. Is that you're expressing surprise?
Okay.
You were unaware of that fact?
Well, I just feel good that you finally got it out. It feels better when you admit.
I'm the first. I was a geek way before it was trendy. Yeah.
Before it was chic.
Believe me, in 1971, it wasn't real popular in high school. Yeah.
Right,
so it's a little better in 2015.
So you're
for those 15 mile away.
Yes, you're a geek. So you always want to know.
Yeah. How fast my internet speed connection is, especially since I'm paying Cablevision, a slight incremental charge for 50 meg download and somewhat not half-fast upload. I know you like that, but anyhow, so the speed test application, has this user interface, and at the end, it kind of presents you with this big button, and there's a little button down below that's rerun the test. The big button that's effectively screaming, click me, click me, click me, is one of these, let me test your system for, performance slowdowns, and if we identify them, we'll charge you $10 to actually go fix them. And even while I know that's the button not to push, probably 10% of the time I click and go, no, that's not what I wanted to do. So they're trying to trick you into doing something when they know that's not what 99.99% of their users want to do. And those notions of tricking people into doing things really infuriate me. So shame on you, speed test.
Shame on you. All right. How about a kudo?
This is kind of a mixed blessing. It's
can't be totally complimentary.
Right, especially when it's Google. And what Google has done, if you're familiar with the term bloatware, that's all the stuff, the crap that's loaded on your phone that when you go to remove the application, it says you can't because somebody has paid them, to put the application on the phone, or in Google's instance, in order to get access to the Google Play Store, the phone manufacturers have to load all sorts of Google software onto the phone. Well, Google has reduced the requirements, and reasonably significantly, as to what's required for the phone manufacturers to put on their phones. And some of it relates to available storage. Google was getting to a point where it was almost impossible to load anybody else's, on low-end handsets where a lot of the battle is being fought. So they had to do that, but at the same time, they A, recognize the pushback from users, and B, recognize the pushback from the EU, who is suing them, and they decided to be proactive and say, yeah, we're going to level the playing field slightly and not force everything down a handset manufacturer. So is that a kudo?
That's a kudo. I have a kudo for Amazon. I ordered a cable.
I like that. You don't have to be defensive.
I ordered a power cable for my phone, and I thought I was ordering a 4-foot cable, and it turns out it was a 4-inch cable. And I ordered 2 of them. It wasn't expensive, so I went online to return it, and they were going to charge me. It cost me $15 for the items, and they were going to charge me $8 to return it.
Yes.
And so I said, all right, let me at least try to. So I hit chat. And I get on, and I said, I want to return this item, but they were going to charge me. He said, oh, no problem. Here's a link, no charge, boom, done.
Wow, you just saved me $6.97. I've got something literally I was going to return, a $15 item.
But the thing that, it's not that I'm looking for something free. It's the issue of they understand what a priority is in terms of customer service and in terms of effort and ease. For a very low cost and a very simple action, they have a happy customer, and it didn't take them a lot of time to make it happen.
Yeah.
And that to me, that's a kudo.
Also brings up an interesting discussion we ought to have in future weeks. And this is how to maximize or minimize expenditures. And by that I mean, there are a number of websites. What?
I said we could talk about the airlines.
Yeah, well, the airlines, cable companies, if you don't like your cable bill, call them up and say, I want to cut my services.
No, just ask for the retention department.
Yeah. Or there are websites where if you go put something in your shopping cart and don't buy it, 10 minutes later they'll send you an email going, we noticed you were looking at this, come back and we'll give you $5 off or something like that. There are a bunch of websites that do that, and that to me, just that's a pet peeve. It's like, why didn't you give me the price in the first place? Instead, you make me play these stupid games and waste 5 minutes. And I understand why you're doing it, because 90% of the people won't take advantage of a discounted offering. But that's why, and another discussion is why I think this whole notion of VRM. I want to do business with vendors who are going to treat me fair.
We probably need to do another session on that.
Yeah.
All right. Your interesting factoid is interesting to me for 2 reasons. One, just because of the sheer volume, but 2 out of the 3 words I don't think most people today even know anymore or can differentiate.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yes, I think that's true.
So why don't you give us your interesting
factoid? It's a 9/11 factoid. The number of computers, broadly involved when the Twin Towers came down. In the buildings, there were approximately 13,000 servers, 16,000 workstations, and 34,000 PCs. That's a lot of hardware. I mean, billions of dollars worth. And Alan's point, the distinction, workstations, there were a lot of financial trading firms, and back then, Sun was a dominant technology provider. You wanted these really hyper fast, functional, dedicated machines, and Sun, they were probably Spark processors.
No, they were definitely Spark.
Yeah. Were a significant financial trading platform, and a lot of those firms were headquartered in the World Trade Center. So 16,000.
But today, I don't think, if your kids growing up today, and anybody probably under 30 doesn't even think about servers or workstations or even PCs, they think about device.
The device and cloud.
Yeah.
And they don't know what's on the back end of the cloud.
But that's a crazy amount of hardware.
Yeah. 60,000 devices.
Right. And We're running up to the hour. Quote, this is, we're usually not this introspective, but I
Yes.
think this is worthwhile for today, the quote of the month.
Yeah, it was a 9/11 observation by Stephen Hawking. And he said, although September 11th was horrible, it didn't threaten the survival of the human race like nuclear weapons do. I don't think the human race will survive the next 1,000 years unless we spread into space. There are too many accidents that can befall life on a single planet, but I'm an optimist. We will reach out to the stars. And, I raised a son who's an aerospace and mechanical engineering major, and still have hopes that he'll, while he's taking a new job, not in that space, I'm an optimist in that regard, that we're in a horrible political climate now. That'll probably be my parting observation. Never was this country closer together than on 9/1/2001. We were a United States, 9/11. We were a United States then, and what's happened in the intervening 14 years is terrible. We are fractured and divisive, and it's a horrible memory to think about on this day.
On that
A
note,
light note. Yeah.
to leave us on a light note, thank you all for joining us today. Alan Berkson and Jonathan Yarmis, Dr. Disruptive. We're here the second Friday of every month in beautiful downtown Stamford. Our next show will be on October 9th, and you can follow the conversation PM Disrupt on Twitter.
Will the World Series be underway at that point? No, or the playoffs?
The playoffs. The playoffs.
Yeah.
And I might
Hashtag LGM.
Hashtag LGM, let's go Mets. So there you go, right now.
Yes.
So thank you all for joining us today, and we'll talk to you soon.